I actually found it very hard to really figure out what I thought about this episode. It feels like forever since Secret Invasion came out, and if you saw my reviews for those episodes, that wasn't the most enjoyable series for me. It really did feel just a bit weird diving back into the MCU, especially only days after the Ahsoka series wrapped up. So I'm going from a franchise that I love but know a ton about, to one that I still like a lot, but am much less knowledgeable in. I've never watched these episodes with the same perspective or eye as I do Star Wars, so I feel like I have a lot less to say in these. Overall, I'd say this was a very solid start to the second season of Loki. There's a lot happening with the story, which I appreciated at times, but at others found myself overwhelmed. The first half of the episode is mostly focused on explaining the events of the season 1 finale to characters that weren't present, like Mobius. As someone who never rewatched the first season after it premiered, it was a nice way to get me back into the story and the characters. The opening montage started it off, but actually incorporating it into the story was a good way to continue it and get everything from the characters' point of view. Although I did feel like it went on a bit too long, where I was ready to start moving on to new material, and Loki and Mobius were still focused on He Who Remains, Sylvie, and everything that played out at the end of time. It was a great season finale, but I don't think we needed to linger on that for as long as we did. But I did mention that at other times I felt overwhelmed by the episode. By the time we get to the end of the episode, if I didn't know any better, I would believe that this episode was a mid-season finale. Not quite big enough for a season finale, but it felt like there was so much happening. The stakes and tension were all there as we're waiting to see if Loki makes it back in time, to see what happens to Mobius standing out by the temporal loom as his suit ages away. It was a huge climax happening already in only the first episode. I assume we'll get some slower episodes throughout the season, but if this is how the majority of episodes are going to be paced and laid out, not only do I think that a lot will be happening throughout the season, but I'll be engaged the entire way through. Even though the episode did slow down a bit at times, it was all done with a purpose, and other than lingering on the events of the finale like I mentioned earlier, I was never bored or impatient with the episode. Going more into the episode, it pretty much starts off with action right off the bat, as a confused Loki is running from the TVA, which we learn takes place in the past. The time slipping was a very interesting concept to dive into, and we'll see if whatever they did worked in the next episode. It might have just been me, but there were moments throughout the episode, particularly here in the beginning, that looked a little grainy and rougher in quality. I don't know if that was a problem with the episode, my device, or if it was on purpose and looked the same in the first season, and I just don't remember it. There's a new TVA logo related to Kane, that includes what looks like his helmet, a sword, and an hourglass. Even though there isn't much said specifically about a new Kane that will likely become the major villain of the season, he's still an omnipresent threat. His mark is everywhere, oftentimes in the art or statues, and I don't think we're meant to forget the looming threat down the line. It'll be interesting to see how the character is dealt with amid the legal situation with Jonathan Majors, but the character himself is still said to be a massive player down the line. But for now it looks like the surface level villain will be Dox, basically the same kind of antagonist that Renslayer was in the first season. Someone within the TVA working against Loki and Mobius, not all that powerful beyond her title, but enough to be a nuisance. She's currently trying to locate Sylvie and make sense of what happened at the end of time. I think the war room scene had the potential to be great, but for me part of the problem was all of these characters that were named once, and then were kinda just there. The one dude was asleep, and then we had Dox and Gamble acting as two sides of the coin when it came to Mobius and B-15's pleas. But because we never got any background on them, I didn't really care about these characters or their position of power. It'll be interesting to see how Dox plays out as an antagonist, because right now I really don't care about her character, only what she's doing and how it impacts the characters I'm already familiar with. The nice thing about the war room scene, though, was that it dealt with a lot of the dark truths and misdeeds of the TVA, something I think will be expanded on down the line now that some of these characters know how the place was built and what was taken from them. We then get to meet Ke Kwan's character, Obi, and he gives such an endearing and genuine performance that I'm immediately drawn to the character. I don't even know if Kwan had to act for the role, because the character just feels like what we've seen from him as a person. He helps Loki and Mobius deal with the time slipping, and I loved the way it jumped between the past and the present in order to move the story forward. With the way the past was impacting the present in real time, it felt like something I had never really seen done before. I'm not saying that there's no story ever that's done this, but it was nice to watch something play out that felt really unique to this episode. This was also where a lot of the comedy was included in the dialogue, and even though it isn't anything laugh-out-loud funny, it's all enough to lighten the mood and make the characters seem funner to be around, kind of like how it was in the first season. Then we get the huge plan to stop Loki from time slipping, and at least for me the stakes were set so quickly that I never really had time to comprehend it all. Everything escalated so quickly, from the extractor to the temporal loom and sealing that off and everything that it never gave me as a viewer enough time to sit with the stakes and actually feel the weight of what was happening. But I do want to say, other than the grainy quality I mentioned earlier, everything visually looked amazing. The time slipping could not have been easy to pull off, and everything with the time stream looked about as good as it could have. There have been some problems with the visual effects in recent MCU projects, but so far this looks on par with the best of Marvel. Loki's eventually saved and makes it back to the TVA before the door shut, but I was curious as to how he got pruned and sent back. It did look like somebody was doing it to him, more than likely from behind, but I didn't see anything to explain that away. This moment also gives us our first look at Sylvie, which takes place at some point in the future, but then we also get Sylvie, dressed differently, in the post-credit scene in a branched timeline in Oklahoma. This one looks to be the same one that killed He Who Remains in the Season 1 finale, but that doesn't exactly explain away what the first one was doing in the TVA. The post-credit scene didn't make all that much sense to me either, other than showing Sylvie wanting or missing that personal connection with someone as she looks around McDonald's. It did more to create questions than answer anything, which isn't a bad thing when it comes to a season premiere. What did you think of this Loki episode? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for coverage of Loki as a new episode premieres every week. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.